Hey, what's up? So we find ourselves now sort of in the epilogue era of the Bionicle storyline. This is where we start running into plot threads that never finish and storylines that never get resolved. This is the era of loose ends. But today we're going to start off with the exception to that rule. Well, kind of, anyway. Today I will be telling you the story of Sahmad. Sahmad is one of the few remaining Agori of the Iron Tribe. The only other one that we know of canonically existing is called Taloris, and he comes up in the story, but he exists, I think purely just to die, so I'm just going to write him out of this retelling, because he really, unfortunately, just doesn't matter. But anyway, Sahmad. As a brief recap, you'll recall that the Iron Tribe is mostly extinct. The reason for this is that an eldritch horror named Inanna started this thing called the Dreaming Plague, where she would basically feast on people's dreams and drive them crazy, and the Iron Tribe was particularly affected by this. The thing is, the Iron Tribe was mostly nomadic. They just kind of moved around mining iron and selling it to people. They didn't have a solid kingdom exactly. And as you may know, particularly if you're somebody who has experience with the Middle East and Northern Africa, nomads are not treated well in a world of kingdoms and nations. For a lot of people in modern society, the bedrock of success is having a solid place where you live and kind of exist. And the fact that nomads are seen as antithetical to what we consider society, it makes their already difficult life that much harder. And then things get even harder when an eldritch demon is driving you insane. So considering this, when these now pretty much entirely crazed nomads wind up at the doorstep of a bunch of other societies seeking refuge, as you can imagine, things don't end well for the nomads. Sahmad was one of the few who was actually immune to the plague. However, the love of his life was not, and she died. So Sahmad did the only logical thing that you can do when your wife dies, and he went into the slave trade. He ended up selling a lot of captured Agori to the Skrull. He eventually, however, had his shit pushed in on a career-ending level by Kina. The end of his career in selling people inspired Sahmad to do the thing that he probably should have done in the first place. Find the source and the solution to the Dream Plague. I'm about to end this man's whole career. No, but I mean, okay, this is kind of a good point. Even considering everything Sahmad has been through, he's still a slaver. He's not a great guy. And actually, at the end of his arc, we kind of get an inkling as to the fact that he will remain possibly not a very good guy, but we'll get to that. Anyway, Sahmad is strolling through the desert when he sees a giant robot descend from the sky to fight another giant robot in the middle of the desert, and he's like, that's neat. So for the last while, Sahmad has just been wandering through the desert, kind of looking for a lucky break in terms of figuring out, the thing that wiped out his entire people. And he finds that lucky break in the form of a snake. The snake formerly known as the fight promoter Metis. If you'll recall, Madanui turned him into a snake for being a snake. So Snake Metis, Snetis if you will, informs our friend Sahmad that something very interesting has happened to him. He's stopped dreaming. And this causes Sahmad to realize, oh fuck, with the chaos of everything, the plague is back. After being in hiding for years, Inanna is taking the opportunity to feed again. This is not good. Honestly, I don't understand why the Dreaming Plague is such a big deal. It happens to, most people who smoke weed, apparently. Sahmad and Metis decide to retrace Metis' steps because if they can figure out where he's been, they can probably figure out where he contracted the Dreaming Plague. This leads them to a place called the Black Spike Mountains. At this point, Spherus Magna has been restored, so a lot of the planet looks a little bit better, but this place certainly does not. Things get more ominous when they find a strange triangular marking on the ground. At which point, Metis gets swallowed up by a giant tentacle. Sahmad doesn't have much time to process this because he also gets swallowed up by a giant tentacle. Sahmad then wakes up in a healing chamber, where he is approached by Kina. Kina informs him that Metis is dead and that he's been asleep for 750 years. Sahmad is like, nope, this is definitely bullshit, and leaves the healing hut. Once outside, he finds himself in a strange marketplace, where he is all of a sudden confronted by his dead lover, who promptly shoots him in the chest. This motherfucker just can't catch a break. One more to 400, folks. Sahmad awakens again in the healing hut, this time surrounded by a bunch of other Iron Agori that he doesn't recognize. And they all speak in unison like that one part of Mass Effect 3 with the Ragnar Queen, and they're all like, you have failed the test. Sahmad isn't fazed by much, apparently, because the first thing he says is, fuck you, show me who you actually are, stop speaking to me through riddles, you cunt. At least that's more or less how the line goes. The Iron Agori then reveal themselves to be the Sisters of the Skrull. Now, I've brought these lovely ladies up before, but I never really went into detail about them. Basically, a long-ass fucking time ago, the female element of the Skrull species decided to go full Andrea Dworkin and separate themselves entirely from the male population. They also got real into some witchy bullshit, and as they did, they made friends with Inanna. This is the part where Sahmad actually finds out that Inanna is the cause of all of this bullshit. At this point, Sahmad is like, fuck it, I'm gonna kill this eldritch god demon. Man's nothing if not determined. Faux hundo! So Sahmad and Metis manage to escape the cave that they're in and eventually do track down Inanna. They find her locked in combat with the gold-skinned being. This is not what the gold-skinned being looks like. This is my mock for melding Pterodax, but I'm using him here because in terms of like size comparison, it makes a lot more sense than the thing I was using earlier. So these two get locked in combat, and the results are interesting. The gold-skinned being gets its power, for the most part, by manifesting the dreams of those that follow it. And Inanna feeds on dreams and makes people go insane. The gold-skinned being has at this point amassed a following of a bunch of Skakti, and also the Toamari, if you remember that happening. That was weird. And he's been basically using the power of their minds to make himself stronger and build like this giant fortress for himself. And Inanna makes all of his followers start to go crazy. So with his followers' brains on the fritz and his fortress crumbling, the gold-skinned being is on his back foot and will very soon be on his back, dead. So Metis and Sahmad hatch a plan. Metis distracts Inanna by throwing a large rock at her. And Sahmad manages to communicate telepathically with the gold-skinned being. I don't remember exactly how that happens, but just suspend your disbelief for a minute. Sahmad is aware, I'm not exactly sure how, but he's aware of the fact that the gold-skinned being is able to make manifest most anything that his followers set their mind to. So Sahmad pledges himself to the gold-skinned being and makes a wish for a world where no one can dream. Now, this doesn't mean a world where no one can dream so everybody goes insane. It means a world where nobody has to dream, because it's not a necessary part of their psyche anymore. This will completely starve Inanna. And the minute it happens, she realizes it and is like, oh god, oh fuck! So now that she's entirely weakened, she has to strike a deal with the gold-skinned being. So in order to save her eldritch ass, the deal that Inanna makes with the gold-skinned being is that she is teleported through his will to an entirely different world where she can feed, and she will leave Spherus Magna and everybody on it alone. The gold-skinned being agrees on the condition that Sahmad gets to envision the world that she is teleported to. And this crafty little shit envisions a world that is filled only with beings like Inanna, so that when she is teleported there, they will all inevitably end up feeding on each other and all eventually starving to death. This works! And just like that, Sahmad saves the world. In the aftermath, Sahmad and the gold-skinned being work to restore everybody on Spherus Magna's ability to dream. Before the two of them part ways, the gold-skinned being tells Sahmad that he's not gonna remain in his fortress forever, and eventually it will be time for him and his army to expand. And Sahmad promises that when that day comes, he will stand beside the gold-skinned being and fight. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the first setup that we get no payoff to. Tune in next time where we find out about a bunch of bug people that live in the jungle and have anti-Toa weapons. Ta-ta!